Welcome back, everyone. I hope you guys had a great break. Uh, so now we'll continue with our presentation. So for the next presentation, we are going to have Michela Corsini, who is going to talk about dealing with the landscape of fear. Fox squirrels' behavior varies across the urban mosaic. So welcome, Michela, and you can start whenever you are ready.
Okay, I'm almost ready. Just testing
Taking
my
time.
presentation. Okay, so can you see my slides?
Yes, we can.
Okay, awesome. So thank you very much for letting me introduce some very recent work I've been doing in the past few weeks. My name is Michela. I'm a postdoctoral research associate at Boise State, and today I'm going to tell you something about what is, in my opinion, the second mascot of Boise State University campus, the fox squirrels. And before jumping into the research questions of this talk, I'd rather give you a short introduction on why it's important to study animals that are in the city. So we know that human population is growing, and we also know that more than half of the human population now lives in cities. And we expect that by 2050, 7 out of 10 people will live in these urban environments. And along with this general movement towards cities, what we also are seeing is a change of the environment around us. So this is a city that I know very well because of my doctoral studies. It's the city of Warsaw, the capital city of Poland. And what you can see here is exactly what's happening a little bit everywhere in the planet, even though the dynamics of these urban dynamics are different and depend strictly on economic and social aspects of the population we're looking at. What is also very important to say is the fact that these changes have a common pattern. That is the change of the original landscapes into impervious surfaces, such as built-up areas, buildings, paved roads, infrastructural networks, and of course also managed green areas. And all these different and novel environments that are forming the urban ecosystems are also having an important consequence on animal communities. But how do animals respond to these changes? There is a first classification that has been done by Blair in 1996, and this was done on birds mainly, but we can easily think about that also in terms of other species. So there are some species, a group is the so-called group of urban avoiders. So these are species that are generally specialists. They're very sensitive to human disturbance, and they can't really find their habitat niche in these human modified landscapes, and therefore they decline once an area is urbanized. We have also a sort of intermediate situation, which is the case for urban adapters. So these are species that are capable of inhabiting both urban and not urban landscapes. And this is, in the case here, this is one of my main studies. Species was the blue-tit. They can breed easily in urban and not urban environments. And on the other side of this scale, we have the other extreme that is formed by the urban exploiters. So these are species that generally take advantage of what the urban environment has to offer. So we know that in the cities, we have humans are the key players, and we know that humans offer a lot of novel food resources. They offer a lot of different refuge types for certain species. They select on certain predators instead of others. And so these urban exploiters increase in numbers, especially in these novel environments. And what belongs to the urban exploiters is the eastern fox squirrels is a great example of that. So these are the largest tree squirrel native to North America. Even though these are originally coming from the eastern US, they've been introduced in many US western cities, including Boise in 1918. And the main reason of introducing the squirrels in the city was for their aesthetic values. I mean, right, these species are cute. We can't say the opposite. And so they're easily observed, especially across the urban settings. They are more rare, though, in rural and natural environments. What is also interesting to say is that these species are so plastic and so adaptive to these novel landscapes that in Europe, they have been included since 2016 in the list of invasive alien species of human concern. So they can't be imported, bred, transported, commercialized, or intentionally released into this environment in the whole of the European Union. But what do we know about squirrels? So in the city, some species of squirrels have been studied. And in terms of behavior, what have been found so far is that in the cities, they're generally bolder. And this is the case especially for the eastern gray squirrel and the Eurasian gray squirrel. But what's happening when we look at populations that are occupying different habitat patches of the urban mosaic? And so because of this question, while I was looking at the squirrels, I decided to run this study for a year. And I decided to investigate more in detail whether fox squirrels' behavior in terms of alert distance and flight initiation distance vary across the urban mosaic between different urban sites. And also, I wanted to see whether fox squirrels' behavior are associated with human presence or habitat characteristics measured at a high-resolution scale. So to perform this study, I observed squirrel across 3 areas of Boise. So one was the Morris Hill Cemetery, another one was the urban park located next to the university campus. That was the 3rd area of the study. The polygons show you the areas where I found the squirrels. So I've been also in other areas nearby, but they were not everywhere. And what is interesting to say is that there were important differences since the first surveys I performed for fun. But what did I do exactly? So I've been measuring squirrels' behavior in the field. So what I did was were behavioral observations that started always at the 40 meters distance from a squirrel and occurred always at between 8 and 11:30 a.m. Of course, I didn't do these studies during the rainy days or with snow on the ground because this can alter their behavior. So I would start approaching a squirrel that was generally looking for food or eating. And then at some point, the squirrel realizes I'm coming. And so that's what is called the alert distance. So the distance at which the squirrel becomes alert to the observer approaching, perceived as a potential predator. And while continuing walking at the same speed towards the squirrel, I would record the time when the squirrel takes off, if it does, because sometimes it didn't do that. So the flight initiation distance is the distance at which the squirrel starts to move away from the approaching observer. What is interesting to say is that the flight initiation distance is also a great proxy of boldness. So the shorter the flight initiation distance, the bolder the individual you are observing. Finally, I took the position of the initial location of the squirrel that here is shown by a red cross. And I measure the distance in between me and the refuge that was used by the squirrel to escape. Again, they didn't use a refuge every time, but when they did, I measured that. Another very important characteristic that I measured was the human presence index. So at the end of each behavioral experiment, I've been counting the number of pedestrians, dogs, and bikers within 100 meters radius from the initial position of the squirrel. The scan lasted more or less 30 seconds, and I've been using a distance meter for all these measurements. Besides service dogs, other dogs were not allowed in the cemetery, but were present in the urban park nearby. So I've been also counting dogs in the cemetery. So what is important is also the aspect of measuring and characterizing the urban landscape using a high resolution remote sensing imagery approach. So after downloading the GPS locations of each squirrels, I generated in QGIS 100 meters grid where I measured in percentages all the different land use classes is in here, 11 in total. And I've been focused on 2 of them because previous studies have been showing that these were good predictors of squirrels' behavior, so built-up areas and tree cover mainly. Of course, I've also included the average daily temperature because this has been seen to have an effect on flight initiation distance. So this is called the seasonal effect, and I decided to use it also in my models. So the first interesting results that you can see in here is the tree height. So whenever the squirrels used the trees to escape, I've been measuring how high on the tree the squirrels were going. And as you can see here, most of the time, the cemetery, they were going at a height that was higher than 2 meters. And the situation didn't change much in the urban park, while in the university campus, the situation was the opposite. They stayed very low on the tree. The type of refuge used also changed a lot. Generally, they used trees because they were the mainly available refuge in the sites. But as you can see in the university campus, they were mainly staying on the ground. So they would take off, but not escape on a tree, even though the tree was there. So when looking at the differences between sites, we can see that in terms of alert distance, we have a strong significant difference between the three sites, between all of them. So in the cemetery, individuals were definitely more alerted than in the other two sites, while on campus, they were less alerted. So this may be definitely related with the land use. The university campus and the urban park are kind of more chaotic. People are around all the time with dogs that are running everywhere. This doesn't happen in the cemetery. There were way less people, especially when I measured human disturbance. When looking at the flight initiation distance, the situation was similar. Again, in the cemetery, the flight initiation distance was longer, meaning that these animals are definitely less bold than in the other two sites. While in the university campus and the urban park, we're looking at the two sites together. They didn't differ from each other, but they both differed from the cemetery. Another very important outcome here was when I looked at the high resolution scale measurements of built-up areas and the tree cover. Especially, I found that in the case of the alert distance, animals were generally more alerted when there was a lot of concrete in the surroundings. That may simply suggest that they didn't have to look for food, they didn't have other business to take care of, and so they were paying attention more in their surroundings. It's also important to say that impervious areas are correlated with many other disturbances, maybe more traffic noise, more humans, more dogs. So this was very interesting. Another important aspect was that there was a negative relationship between alert distance and distance from refuge. So that may suggest that, that definitely suggests that animals that were more alerted were generally closer to trees. So what that suggests to me is the fact that maybe bolder individuals are usually feeding farther away. And when looking at the flight initiation distance models, what I found when looking at all these high resolution scale measurements was the importance of only one of the predictors analyzed, and that was the alert distance. And it was a completely positive relationship. So the sooner they realize you're approaching them, the sooner they take off. And that was the most important covariate of all the other covariates in the model. In the studies I've been looking at, this covariate was often not included. And so that, I think, is a very important aspect to take into account when we look at their flight initiation distance responses. So take-home messages. What we found in here is that the alert distance varies significantly between sites, and the same happened for the flight initiation distance. That was higher in the cemetery than in the urban park and on campus. And another important finding was that the alert distance was higher in areas characterized by extended impervious areas and in proximity to refuge. What is also important to add in here is the fact that the flight initiation distance was positively associated with alert distance, and there was no link with any of the other habitat characteristics or the human present index that I've been measuring. So that being said, I would really like to thank my collaborators, Dr. Jen Cruz, for giving me some great statistical advices on the analysis I've run in here. I also would like to thank Jose Hernandez for his precious help in pitching up this story in his full frame, in framing the story here. And I would also like to thank my sister, Michela Corsini, for providing this amazing experimental design graphs that she put together to explain the protocols. And of course, I would like to thank you all for your attention, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
That was a really fascinating and interesting talk, and we already have a few questions on YouTube. So Alexis is asking, did you take into account the density of number of possible refuge around the area at the moment you approached?
I didn't write exactly how many trees were around, but that's because generally in all the areas I was, there were trees all over the place where squirrels were. I've been performing the the behavioral experiments also in areas without trees, but squirrels were not around.
Next question is from Laura. And they're asking, interesting talk, thank you. Areas B and C, the urban park and university, are very close to each other. Can squirrels move between those two areas? If yes, why you still see differences in some behaviors? And if no, what is the difference between an urban park and a campus that would explain the differences?
Okay, so generally what I think, and this is completely speculative, I can't speak for that much. I agree, these sites are very close to each other, and indeed, in some cases, we didn't see significant differences in the responses, but they can definitely cross. There are bridges that are connecting the two areas. What is important to add, in my opinion, is that the land use, the way people behave in these areas is not exactly the same. So in the park, I would say that people usually are more spread around. So it's a disturbance that is not cumulative in a spot or occurring all at the time, like on campus. On campus, you have at some point when students have to go for lunch or they have to change classes, and they move in huge groups and they are literally like filling the place everywhere. So disturbance is way higher. Another important thing I didn't mention is that on campus and in the park, squirrels are fed by humans. While in the cemetery, I've never seen that happening. So that can be another reason why they are bolder. But it was a very nice question, and I agree with that point. They're very close.
Uh, so Monica mentioned in the YouTube chat, they don't have any questions, but they would like to congratulate you for a great presentation.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
I have a question. So did you look at the individual, like were all the 137 individuals or something, were they all different individuals? Like, did you mark them, or was there like a number of individuals that you like recorded again, maybe?
So I wish I could mark them, because I can definitely tell that some individuals, I got to know them after a year chasing them around. So, but I didn't mark them. That this study is a completely side work I've been doing out of my curiosity for fun. So I didn't really had permits to catch, to mark the individuals or to do anything like that. But I wish I could, because it would be very nice to do some like further investigation on personality traits. And that's something you can do only with replicate responses of the same individuals that you know who they are. But definitely, I can't tell who they are. But I've been very carefully measuring their behavior. I would always walk far away to avoid sampling the same individual during the same day, that's for sure. So that was guaranteed during the experiments.
And since we are running out of time, a final question, since you are working with squirrels and like you said, you are chasing them for over a year, were there any interesting, fun experiences, field experiences that you'd like to share with us?
Like fun experiences, meaning how people reacted to me chasing squirrels, or more general,
That
like
too,
about squirrels'
yeah, that
behavior?
too, yeah, that too, or like you interacting with squirrels or like some fun, interesting behavior with squirrels
Oh,
among the squirrels
yes.
that you saw. Yeah.
So a couple of times they jumped on me. And well, a few times people were wondering what the hell I was doing. So that was pretty funny, because I had to give explanations about what was going on. Clearly, when you do this type of studies, especially when you work in areas like the cemetery, I think it's very important to be respectful. So I've been very, very careful in the cemetery. But in the urban parks and on campus, it was a very nice opportunity to interact with people that are on campus most of the time. But definitely what happened is two squirrels jumped on me because they thought I had food. So
Yep. That's always fun to work with animals in the wild. But again, thank
it's,
you for your presentation. That was a really great to hear.
thank you very much.
And yep, best of luck with your future research.